no antidepressant works. Hit the glutamate receptor. What does that mean? I have a lot more content at drmarkagresti.com, and I explain in depth everything about the glutamate receptors. You could read one of my blog articles, but today let's do a little review of the glutamate receptor. There are three receptors: the Ampa, the kainate, and the NMDA, N-methyl-D-aspartate. That's the money receptor. That's what treats depression. What is this receptor? Glutamate is an amino acid that stimulates the NMDA receptor. In depression, that receptor becomes highly reactive and overstimulates the central nervous system, causing neurotoxicity, causing degradation of neural pathways, causing degradation of synapses, preventing cell growth, and preventing new neural pathways from forming. So in the late 90s, information started coming out about this. In the past 20 years, 25 years, we've come a long way. What affects that receptor? And I'm going to list them in order of their ability to block that receptor. It's toxic, it's overstimulated in depression and in schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. Esketamine is the most potent blocker of that NMDA receptor. Thus, this is a drug called Spravato. And intranasal, you just sort of, from this, I have videos on that, of how you get esketamine Spravato into your system. What's the next most potent CNS blocker of the NMDA receptor? Is ketamine. The only difference between esketamine and ketamine, esketamine is the left, R-ketamine is the right. They're called enantiomers. Ketamine is the combination of them both. Esketamine is just the left. Most potent NMDA blocker. Second is ketamine. Third is dextromethorphan. So, what is so special about blocking this receptor? This receptor, of the three, Ampa, kainate, and NMDA receptor, the glutamate receptors, glutamate being a neurotransmitter, which is an amino acid. Amino acids make up proteins. This is an excitatory neurotransmitter, glutamate, and we're blocking its receptor. It is the most common neurotransmitter in the central nervous system. It's fighting with GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter, the yin and yang. Glutamate excites, GABA inhibits. The two of them fight for the most common. They determine what goes on in the central nervous system. Everything else is a minor player. So here we have blockade of the NMDA receptor. Why it's so important? Because in depression, it becomes toxic. It becomes neurotoxic. It overstimulates the system. When you see in people in depression, they're just not right. They're not as functional, not as animated. They're irritable, anxious, tense, restless, or just completely shut down, agitated or lethargic. That's because of that receptor. So when we block that receptor, the most potent blocker is esketamine. That's the intranasal. Ketamine is an IV infusion, and dextromethorphan, which is part of the drug Auvelity, which is dextromethorphan, and bupropion. We're talking about drugs that block the NMDA receptor, which is a glutamate receptor. Now, what do you do when you block that receptor? The minute you block that receptor, the brain sends out signals immediately, within seconds, to increase, believe it or not, glutamate in the prefrontal area. That's what gives people animation, character, brings them alive. You know what a lobotomy is? When they drill a hole in your prefrontal cortex, you become a zombie. Well, When that area of the brain is not working correctly, you become a zombie. And I've seen certain drugs like fluoxetine, Prozac, cause, like a prefrontal syndrome, cause almost a drug-induced lobotomy. So we need to stimulate that in depression, and that's what blocking of this receptor does. It releases glutamate in the prefrontal cortex. You know what else it does? It stimulates the Ampa glutamate receptor. What does that do? That increases nerve connections, a healing. So one nerve connects to another nerve, connects to another one. That's the nerve pathway's healing. It's called synaptogenesis. So it stimulates that right away. Also, it blocks the inhibition of GABA. So if we block the inhibition, we increase GABA. So the inhibitory neurotransmitter GABA is thus increased, calming you down, giving a sense of well-being. So we're seeing glutamate do a lot. What else does it do? It causes the release of brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF, and it does something else. It stimulates MTOR, mechanism target of rapamycin, and those two nerve signaling compounds cause neuroplasticity, synaptogenesis, meaning they create new neural pathways. They create neurons to form like chains or rail cars with one another. But it's not how it really works in a brain. One goes to 100 to 1,000,000. And so it creates neuroplasticity, new neural formations, new neural connections, new neural pathways. That's called healing. A little lesson here on this receptor. This receptor, this NMDA receptor, which is a glutamate receptor, and we have drugs that block it, esketamine, ketamine, dextromethorphan. How do they block it? It's not necessarily a receptor and it blocks it. This is not how it works. The receptor is made up of 4 parts and they form a ring. There are 2 N1s, 2 glutamate N1s and 2 glutamate N2. And they form this transmembrane portal or pipe. And the pipe allows sodium and calcium to come through the pipe, and it prevents, when we block the pipe, that's what we're doing with ketamine, esketamine, and dextromethorphan. We don't necessarily block glutamate from hitting the receptor, we block the portal that allows for these positively charged ions to go through, and what that does, it prevents the nerves from firing and incapacitates or slows down the NMDA receptor. So let's see if I got that clear. The glutamate still combines with the receptor, but what these blockers do, esketamine, ketamine, and dextromethorphan, they prevent the transmission of positively charged ions going through the tetramer, the 4-part portal created by the NMDA receptor. So calcium, which is positively charged, sodium don't get through. And what happens now, if those don't get through, we can't hyperpolarize the neuronal tissue and it can't transmit messages. That's probably more involved than you need, but just a little caveat here. 40% of people over age 18 in this country have been on a psychotropic. Now, if you were to include marijuana, cocaine, opiates, amphetamines into that as psychotropics, you're probably looking at 80% of the population. So when patients come to me, I give them more information than they need. You take from it what you want. I'd rather give you more than less. I just don't want to bore anybody. So now we've talked about the blockade of the receptor with esketamine, ketamine, dextromethorphan. This blockade prevents positively charged ions from going through the ion, say, tunnel or pipe, preventing the neurons from being able to get charged and carry action potential, which is electrical messages. And what that does is it immediately, like when people get a ketamine treatment, boom, glutamate hits their prefrontal cortex. They come alive. All of a sudden, healing compounds, mTOR, BDNF, are secreted. The Ampa receptor gets stimulated, causing synaptogenesis, neurospasticity, nerve growth, nerve healing properties. So it's immediate, and that's why. And this is why, if you're having trouble with depression, you know, the money receptor is the glutamate receptor, the NMDA receptor. And that's why everyone's talking about it, and that's why all the new drugs. Think about it, Auvelity. What's that? That's dextromethorphan and bupropion. Esketamine, the miracle drug. That's a nasal inhaler. Immediately snaps people out. Immediately, nothing works so quickly. These drugs work quickly. Blocks the NMDA receptor. Ketamine, the IV infusions. Remember those IV infusion clinics for ketamine? Boom. Gets people right out of it. Anyway, hit me up at drmarkagresti.com. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Dr. Mark Agresti from my office in Palm Beach. Have a good day.